If you would have told me 2 years ago that one of my silly little arts and crafts projects that I made in my tiny little home office would be seen by over 40 million people, I wouldn't have believed you, but that's what happened. A couple of years ago, I posted a New York City kind of pop-up card that had a little nod to Taylor Swift and incorporated a lot of my favorite things and clearly a lot of yours too. I still get comments to this day asking me how I made that card, and it's actually super simple. It uses a technique called a double Z fold, and I promise it's a lot easier than it sounds. Today I'm going to be recreating that card using supplies in my stash, but don't worry, this technique is super versatile and you can create a million different card designs using this technique with the supplies that you have in your stash. Let's dive in. All right, before we jump into making the card, let's just quickly look at the two primary supplies that we're going to be using today. So starting with the stamp set, we have this City Heroscape, which you can see that I bought from Tuesday Morning forever ago, back when you could still, well, back when Tuesday Morning even still existed. But I bought this at Tuesday Morning forever ago when I first got into card making. I kid you not, I've probably used this stamp set more than any other stamp set in my collection, so it is very well loved. Of course, I do have a love affair with New York City and city skylines in general, so the stamp set from day one has always had my name written all over it. But we're going to use this for the main backdrop of our card today. And then I also have this die set, I forget what this one's called. Tri-Fold Edge City Fancy Die. I believe I also picked this up from Tuesday Morning around the same time. It may be difficult to tell here just looking at it in the package, but it's 3 separate dies that kind of create a layer of cityscape. So we have this kind of park scene here, and then 2 different lines of buildings. I'm actually only going to be using this park scene die for today's card, but this is a really fun die in general as well. Now, I will say, I think that both of these items are retired / no longer being made or sold. I will do my best to scour the internet and leave any links I can find to these products down below in the description box. But remember, we're focusing on the overall design technique today. You can use whatever dies and stamps you have on hand to create your own version of what we're about to make. Now that's enough chatting about supplies. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is get started on our background with a piece of white cardstock. And here I have a piece of 110-pound smooth white cardstock that I've already cut down into an A2 size. So this is 5.5 inches this way and then 8.5 inches this way. Now for this card today, we're not going to just fold it in half like a standard A2 size card. We're going to create what is called a Z fold, which is actually a very easy technique. It looks a lot more impressive and sounds a lot more difficult than it is. I promise it's very easy. But before we get to folding, I want to do some stenciling on this background, and stenciling is a lot easier if you don't have score lines already on your paper. So I'm going to go ahead and do my background stenciling before I do any scoring and folding. And for the background today, I want to add some nice blue fluffy clouds using this cloud line stencil from Simon Says Stamp. What we're going to be doing is we're creating a sunny, happy, kind of New York Central Park feeling cityscape. And so I want the background to just be a really beautiful blue summer day in New York. If you followed me for any time at all, you know that I love making stencil backgrounds. It's such an easy wow and pop to your cards. I think it's one of those things that looks a lot more impressive than it actually is to do. So if you don't have a cloud stencil, I would highly recommend getting one or making one. A cloud stencil would actually be very simple to make yourselves. I did just upload a video a couple of weeks ago showing you how you can make your own stencils. So if you're interested in doing that, be sure to go check that video out. And I'm going to work from the bottom up. And for my blue sky color, I'm going to be using Salty Ocean from Distress Ink. This is my go-to blue sky. I don't know why, I just feel like it's the perfect medium tone blue for a sunny blue sky. And I'm just going to go in and add some ink along this cloud line. Now, I don't know why this card went as crazy viral as it did over on TikTok. I love that it did though, because it honestly uses some of my favorite supplies and techniques. For instance, like I just mentioned, I love doing cloud backgrounds like this. I also love New York, and I already told you that this uses my favorite stamp set I own. So I don't know, it almost felt like a serendipitous thing that of course people liked this card because it uses all of my favorite things. I think it also helps that for the sentiment of this card, we're actually going to be using a Taylor Swift lyric. As you might imagine, it's a New York themed card, so we're going to be referencing her song, Welcome to New York. And so I don't know, maybe the Swifties helped out there too. Now, once you've got your first layer of clouds done here, let's go ahead and move the stencil on up. I'm going to use the second line of clouds here now. And we're just going to repeat all the way up the background of our card. All right, so as you can see, we now have a beautiful cloudy blue sky for our background. Now, the last thing we want to add to our background piece before we fold is I want to go ahead and add that city skyline stamp set. And to help me out with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my stamp platform here. And I'm going to place my card base all the way in this bottom left-hand corner. Now, this is cut to fit the stamp platform exactly, so it's pretty much a flush fit, but if you can, get it as close as you can to this bottom left-hand side, because we're going to be stamping on this side, and we're going to be stamping all the way to the edge. So if you can give yourself even a little millimeter of extra room to make sure you have room to get your stamp up against that edge, that would be a good idea. Now, this stamp set has 3 primary layers. This is a layered stamp set. We have this large stamp here, which has our tallest buildings, and then we're gonna go in with our medium height buildings, and then finally our smallest buildings. And I don't know if you can see here, but on these stamps, you have these large blocks of black here, and that black silhouette lines up with the stamp that goes on top of it. So you have kind of some helpful guides to help you with lining up these stamps. Now, for this particular card, I actually don't want to put my stamp all the way at the bottom of the card base. I'm going to leave about 3/4 of an inch or so of room here. That's because the fold piece, which I'll show you how to make here in just a second, we're going to create a little fold piece that goes down here at the bottom. That's going to cover up this stamp. If we were to put the stamp way down here, that little fold piece is going to cover up a large portion of the stamped image, which we don't want. And we want our buildings to look a little bit higher than that. So let's leave about 3/4 of an inch of room from the bottom. Okay, and once you're happy with how that's lined up, go ahead and pick up your stamp. And for this bottommost layer, the tallest one, I like to work from lightest to darkest with my layered stamp set. So the first stamp, that very bottom layer, should be your lightest color, and the last layer you stamp on top should be your darkest layer. So for this bottom layer, I'm going to go in with EARL, which is a light gray from the Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated Ink Collection. I really like the Simon Says Stamp inks for stamping. I love my Distress inks, as you guys know. They are my go-to when it comes to ink blending, but I do enjoy a foam pad for stamping. So I do find I gravitate towards these Simon Says Stamp inks a lot. All right, here we go. Layer number 1. Now we're probably going to need to add a couple of layers here per stamp. Yeah, we're going to need to go over that one more time, if not 2 more times. All right, there we go. I think that that is starting to look good enough for me. So let's go ahead and move on to the second layer. Before grabbing that second stamp, I'm just going to wipe this large one off with a wet paper towel. Now, like I said, they give you some kind of guidelines to help you line these stamps up. You should be able to line them up with these larger blocked out silhouette areas. And once you feel good about your placement, let's go ahead and pick up layer number 2. And then I'm gonna go in with a little bit darker of a gray this time. We're gonna use charcoal, still from the Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated ink line. All right. And then lastly, let's go in with layer number 3. For this last layer, I'm actually not going to be using a Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated ink. I'm just going to use my regular old black Versamark ink, my tried and true. I just don't think there's any black ink out there quite like it. There's just nothing that beats the blackness and the crispness of the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. All right. Ta-da, we have our background, which kind of looks a little crazy right now. It's just a bunch of clouds and a random floating cityscape. I promise it's all going to come together here in just a few minutes, but we are probably halfway, if not a third of the way there already. Let's keep moving. Now, this is where things start to get interesting because we're actually going to start working on the fold of our card now, which is what gives this card all of the magic, if you ask me. Now, as I mentioned, what we're doing with today's card is called a Z-fold, and what that means, which bear with me, I'm not an expert here, but what that means is we're going to create kind of an accordion fold that consists of 2 folds of our primary card base. And then we're also going to cut out a strip of paper that extends across the entire length of the card base. And we're gonna fold it in a similar Z pattern, but we're gonna do it the opposite way and then adhere them together. I know that probably doesn't sound like it makes any sense. It'll make a lot of sense here in a second, I promise. So first things first, with my Scor-Pal here, I'm gonna create a couple of score lines for our 2 folds. The first one I'm gonna create is at the halfway mark, as we would normally with any A2 size card. We're gonna score right here in the middle at 4 1/4. But I'm actually gonna do this upside down because I want the fold to go this way, not this way. And at 4 1/4, I'm gonna go ahead and give our card base a score. Oh my goodness, okay. This is embarrassing. What did I do? Oh my gosh, I scored this at 4 inches, not 4 1/4. Okay, clearly this is off. The score line should be lined up with the edges of our building here. I completely just scored at the wrong place. Okay, I'm an idiot. I don't know if we can recover from this or not, but let me go ahead and score at 4 1/4 anyway. Maybe what I can do is just buffer this score line out a bit. Maybe it won't be too distracting because really that's gonna be on the inside. I think we can recover. I'm not gonna start over, guys. It's fine to make mistakes. It's gonna be fine. So just know that this should not be here. The score line we actually want is right here at 4 1/4. And what I'm actually gonna do, we're testing this in real time. I've never really tried this. I'm gonna try to just buff this score line out a little bit by pressing down on it in the opposite direction. Does that make sense? So we're kind of flattening it out. Oh my gosh, wait, it looks like it's working. Wait. I mean, it's not perfect, but that definitely helped. Wow, okay, y'all, it kind of worked. Okay, so pretend that didn't happen. Now, what we're gonna do for our second score line is this one, I want to go the opposite way, so I am going to be scoring it with the pretty side face up. And for this fold, we wanna do it the halfway mark between the edge and our 4 1/4 mark. So, if you can do the math, you guessed it, we're gonna be scoring it at 2 1/8 of an inch, which fortunately our score buddy here already has this little dot here, so it's telling us exactly where we need to go. Okay, and that's it. Those are our 2 score lines. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and reinforce both of those by folding along the score lines and then just giving them a quick burnish. And let's do the same thing for this one. Okay, so you're gonna end up with something that looks like this. I know it looks a little crazy. I promise it'll look better by the end. But if you look from the top, do you see how that makes a Z? The fold makes this little Z. That's why this card gets its name as the Z fold. So you can see we've kind of created this accordion mechanism already. Now, the next thing we want to do is actually create our bottom piece that goes here across the bottom edge. And that is going to be our other piece of the Z fold. So what I'm gonna do is let's set this aside for just a minute. And then I wanna grab another piece of cardstock of the same weight. So this is another 110-pound piece of cardstock. And I'm going to cut off just 3/4, maybe a hair higher than 3/4, just to make sure that we cover up fully to that bottom edge. And so this is 8.5 inches long, because again, this is 8.5 inches long, and we want them to be the same length. So let's cut about 3/4 of an inch, just like so. And then with this strip of paper, what we're gonna do is we're actually going to do the same fold that we already did, but just kind of do the opposite, if you will. When you look at your card, you have a score line at the 2 1/8 inch, and then the 4 1/4 inch, and then nothing. Right? So you have 4 1/4 inches of nothing over here, no score lines. So we kind of want to do the opposite with the strip of paper. So we're going to do 4 1/4 inch of no score lines. So that is all blank. And then on this end, we're going to want a score line in the halfway mark. So do you get how that's the opposite of what we just did. Now my Scor-Pal isn't long enough to do that, so I am gonna flip this, reverse it real quick, and do my 2 1/8 inch on this edge. Okay, so I'm probably not gonna worry about burnishing these because they're such small score lines, I can just pinch them. But when you apply this to your card, imagine this is glued down on this side and this is glued down on this side. Now we have this kind of Z-fold mechanism, right? You can see that from the top. We have a double Z-fold. Now, I don't want to adhere that just yet because I still have more that I want to add to this card. I want this side of the card to actually be kind of like a central park scene, which is where the die set comes in that I showed you at the beginning of this video. So let's set this to the side for now. So for the central park scene, I'm gonna bring in another piece of blank cardstock here and go ahead and grab that park die from my die set here. Now, I'm not really measuring here, but I just want to give myself enough room down here at the bottom to just kind of give the illusion of that park and enough to kind of cover up that bottom layer of our cityscape. I think something like this should do just fine. And then I'm just going to quickly run it through my die cutting machine. Now, what we're doing here is something that is one of my big fears. I don't often love doing this. In fact, I have a video exactly about this topic. And what I'm talking about is using alcohol markers to color on my die cuts. That's exactly what we're doing. We're going to be doing some free-handed coloring. Now, fortunately, I think that this die is simple enough and small enough that it's not going to give us much issue because I don't feel like we need to add a ton of detail. But if you want to see another video where I face my fears of freehand coloring on dies, feel free to go check out that video. I will leave it linked down below. Okay, so here we go. We end up with something like this. Now I have a ton of tiny little pieces here I need to get out. Do I have my die pick on me? Yes, I do. Die pick to the rescue. If you don't have a die pick, y'all, I would highly recommend to help you just kind of clear out these little pieces. Now at this point, all I'm gonna do is grab some of my alcohol markers and just go ahead and color in this scene. I'll probably speed this part up because if I didn't, we would be here a while, but I'll catch you on the other side. All right, and there you have it. We have our colored kind of central park scene. Now, this was actually way easier and quicker than I remember it. Clearly, I've grown a lot, I feel like. I like to think that I have as a card maker since I first made this card, because when I first made this card, probably almost 2 years ago now, I remember feeling like, wow, this is such a cool, advanced card. And honestly, it's coming together very quickly and easily today. So let this also be a reminder that the more you work at something, the better and quicker you will be. Now, all that to say, what I'm gonna do next is, oh, by the way, if you noticed, I also took that strip of cardstock that we created our second Z fold with, and I colored the second half green. And the reason I did that is because we're actually going to glue this part onto our strip to create one large strip. Now, if you wanted to get super advanced here, whenever you cut the strip, instead of just doing a straight edge, you could do kind of a curved cut to meet that hill if you wanted it to look a little bit more natural. Honestly, I'm not concerned about it, so I have this kind of drop off here, but you could kind of clean that part up if you wanted to. Now, what I am gonna do is go ahead and apply some adhesive. I'm just using tape runner, but of course you can use glue as well. And I'm just gonna glue this right down on the edge. Perfect. So let's bring our card base back in here and see what this is starting to look like. So we're not gonna glue this down yet, but you can imagine if we did glue it down, we're starting to get that kind of park in front of the city kind of vibe, right? I like to think so. And again, from the top, you see our double Z fold. Now, the last thing I want to do before I go ahead and put this card all together is actually create the sentiment for this card. Now, the sentiment for this card is going to be a little unique, and I think this is maybe part of why this card went crazy viral when I first made it, is because we're going to create a large sentiment block that we're just going to adhere to this left-hand panel, and then we're actually going to hide our sub-greeting or sub-sentiment behind that block, and it only becomes exposed once we open the card. Now, for that greeting or sentiment, whatever you want to call it, like I said, we're going to be using the Taylor Swift lyrics from her song, Welcome to New York. So it's going to say on the front, Welcome to New York. On the inside, it's been waiting for you. Now, obviously I don't have a stamp set that has Taylor Swift lyrics, but that's okay, because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create my own custom sentiment using my Cricut. If you're interested in learning how to do that yourself, I have a full dedicated video on how to create custom sentiments for your cards using your Cricut. I'll be sure to leave that linked up top as well as down below in the description box. Now I'm going to go ahead and make that sentiment. All right, bada bing, bada boom, we have our primary greeting and our sub-greeting here. Now let's go ahead and start putting this card together, shall we? Now the first thing I want to do is go ahead and adhere our Z fold here. I am going to apply adhesive just on this outermost edge here. Keep in mind, we're not going to add adhesive here. We want to keep this area bare. So we're just adding adhesive here on this outside half. And then we want to add adhesive just on this half here. So just from that score line over. So there's really not a ton of surface area that's actually getting adhesive. You're just going to do this little quarter of the card panel here, and then this little quarter of the strip on this side, and then we'll place it down like so. Now you do want to do this carefully. So let's make sure you have that squared up with the corner down here in the bottom left. And then same thing on this side. Let's make sure we're square down here in the bottom right. And ta-da, you end up with something like so. Now for the greeting, what we're gonna do is when it's closed, I want the greeting to be pretty much centered. So it'll be, that looks centered, right? Let me go ahead and add some adhesive. And again, we only want to add adhesive to one half of this because the other half is just going to be hanging off the edge. So something like so. And now what we can do with our sub greeting here is using the flap, you know, this quarter of a flap here, as well as our primary greeting here, we can kind of tuck this behind so that it's hidden when the card is closed. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a little bit of liquid glue just because this sentiment is a little bit more intricate. I don't think the tape runner would be as great of an option here. And then I probably should use tweezers for this. Unfortunately, I don't have them right next to me and I'm too lazy to go grab them. So I'm just going to do my best to eyeball this. I think that looks good. Yep, perfect. That'll do. And then the only small little remaining detail I want to add is I cut out a small yellow circle here. You can use this with any circle die you have, whatever size, you know, just find one that's relatively small. Or if you have a circle punch, you can use that as well. But I'm just going to add a little pop of yellow peeking out here over that top greeting. Just because, I don't know, I think adding a little bit of warmth and a little bit of contrast up there in that top right-hand corner just really makes the card pop. All right, y'all, and there you have it. We have our completed card, Welcome to New York. We've been waiting for you. And you know what? It just dawned on me that I think I told you guys earlier in the video the sub-greeting would be, it's been waiting for you. And I definitely did we've been waiting for you instead. I think that she says both in the song, right? Someone let me know down in the comments if I'm wrong about that. I think she uses both depending on which lyric it is. But anyway, there is our double Z fold card. Now, of course, I did a beautiful little cityscape and park scene here, But you can use this double Z fold for so many various designs and ideas. It's a super simple design technique that you can use to make your cards really come to life and feel three-dimensional. Now, at this point, you might be asking yourself, well, do you apply it to a card base? And yes, you totally can. You can adhere this to an A2 size card base so that you have it, you know, fold out this way, and then you could open it this way. However, if that feels a little too bulky and too much for you, you can always write your note here on the back as well. And this is gonna slip into an envelope super, super easy. By the way, I didn't forget that I told you guys I would show you a different variation of this card. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now, it looks very similar, right? But this is kind of the nighttime version, and it's still New York themed. So up here it says, "It's always been New York or nowhere," which is one of my favorite little quotes or quips, or I don't know, I feel like that's been a very popular phrase these past few years. And in this case, I actually did a silhouette black outline of the park, so it really gives that nighttime feel. And when you open it up, we have this big moon up here, and we have our cityscape still, but instead we have water down here showing kind of the reflection of the moon. So I just wanted to show you guys a different variation. It's literally the same design technique, a lot of the same elements, but a completely different look and feel. But that's it, y'all. That is how I created the viral double Z fold Taylor Swift New York City inspired greeting card. I still have no idea how it racked up over 40 million views and reached so many people. It blows my mind, but I hope that if you are one of those people who watched it and were interested in how to make it, you walk away today having learned something. If you're interested in watching more of my card making content, make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss my next upload, and be sure to click on one of the suggested videos that gets recommended to you at the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye, y'all.